Hey folks, welcome back to another review with yours truly, Sam Healey. Today we're taking a look at this fella right here, Tsukuyumi, Full Moon Down. It is a game designed by Felix Mertikat, and it is put out by King Racoon Games, I believe a German company, I think. Could be wrong there, but I apologize if I am. So basically, this game is an area control, asymmetric player power game where you are vying for control over the Earth. And the reason this is happening is because the moon has crashed into the Earth and brought with it a bunch of Oni with it. And they are causing trouble. You are fighting against them, you're fighting against each other, and you're simply trying to score the most points by controlling the most areas, finishing the most missions and goals and that type of stuff, and trying to keep your opponents from doing the same thing. So that's pretty much it. It's kind of a dudes on the board type thing, but you are vying for control of the Earth. Let's get down to the table. I'll show you how it works in a very general way because there's a lot to talk about in this game and I can't talk about everything, but I'll try to give you at least the bare bones, backbone version of how you play the game so that you can maybe look further if it interests you. But anyway, let's get down to the table and get to it. Now, the point of the game is to score the most points, and you do that in a number of different ways. For example, you see here that there are a number of different ways you can score victory points. You can score instant victory points by controlling areas of the moon. You can finish different missions, faction-specific goals, destroying Fireborn if we're playing with that expansion. And then there are other sources that some factions will allow you to score victory points immediately. And then you're also going to be scoring points at the end of the game here for controlled areas, controlling fertile ground, and initiative placement. So the first person, the person who is in first initiative will get 2 points, and the person who's in second place gets 1 point, and so forth and so on. Each round, we're going to choose an action card. We're going to execute white phase, blue phase, green phase, red phase. Then we're going to score any of those immediate things from over here, and then we'll move on to round 2. And you play the game in a number of rounds that you determine beforehand. So if you just want to play 3 rounds, you can just play 3 rounds, and then whoever has the most points at the end of the 3 rounds is the winner. A normal game will go 4 rounds, with an epic game going 5 rounds. Everybody has a faction sheet that they start off with, which gives them all of the information they need to play their faction. So, for example, here we have the Comp Group 3, and they are kind of a robot faction that's not represented on the board here. Then you also have the Nomads, which are the human inhabitants of Earth, and they're going to be vying for control just like anybody else. But you basically just choose what faction you want to be, and then you go over it. Another cool thing that I thought was pretty neat is that they have these diamonds up here, which denotes how difficult or how involved playing this group is. So both of these groups are factions are fairly easy to play, but then you see you have the Dark Seed down here, which has 2 diamonds, and then the Cyber Samurai over there also have 2 diamonds. So they're a little bit more difficult to play than the other factions. They just have a little bit more going on. But the different things about a faction sheet is, of course, you have your faction effect, which will take place in the blue phase. Then you have a defensive ability, which will take place during the combat phase, provided you're attacked and people try to annihilate you and all this other kind of stuff. You also have a faction-specific goal that's over here that only you can try to attain. They're rather difficult, though. And then down here you have the production capabilities of your faction. So you have 1 production point. You can produce any of these units, or you can purchase weaponry, which raises the damage effectiveness of your faction. And then on the back side, you also have some different things that are just extra information, explanations about what all of your different people can do, what your faction effect can do, and it goes into detail there. And then also your starting units as well. And then here we have the initiative track here, which tells you the order in which the different factions will take place. You have a place to keep track of what round it is. You also have the event card deck, which will be used throughout the course of the game. And then over here, you have each faction brings a specific goal to the table. and each faction can accomplish these goals once. So the Boar Lords, the Darkseid, and the Cyber Samurai can all try to finish this goal, even though it's the Cyber Samurai's mission. The event card deck over here is used throughout the course of the action round because some of the things in your actions allow you to either draw 1 or 2 or 3 and play up to that many event cards if you would like to. Other kinds of event cards that are out here, you have this one which says that units in this area cannot move this round. Units can still move into the zone, however. Then you also have other things like new alignment, where you can swap any 2 adjacent areas, including all of their markers. Now, there's some caveats with a card like this, however. The moon can never be replaced or swapped or anything like that. Home areas cannot be swapped or moved like that either. And then you have this where it says you may execute 1 combat action immediately by playing this card. Now the action cards, since we've already mentioned them a few times, the action cards are actually the core of the game because it's giving you what you're going to be doing. Each player will start with 6 of these cards, and then for the first round they will choose 1 of them and then pass the other 5 to the player on their left. And then at the beginning of the second round, you're going to take those cards that were passed to you and choose another action card for the second round and then pass them, and so forth and so on. So there is a card drafting mechanism here that is actually really neat. The white phase is where everybody in initiative order is going to be able to choose to do 2 of these actions. And then once everybody has done 2 of those actions, we'll flip the card over and it gives you the actions that you're going to be able to do in each of the subsequent phases. For example, whoever chose to do this card, they would be able to use their faction-specific effect in the blue phase, and that's all they would be able to do. However, somebody else might have a whole bunch of things that they can do in the blue phase. Each of these action cards are unique. There isn't the same exact actions duplicated on any of them. So once everybody has completed their blue phase actions, we would go back in initiative order to green phase actions. And then once everybody's finished that, you go down to red phase actions, and so forth and so on. Now, each of these actions can be carried out in any order that you wish. So if you have one of these cards like this that have a whole bunch of different things here, you can accomplish them in any order that you wish, except movement has to occur before combat. So now I'm just going to explain some of the actions that you can do during the course of your turn. So we're going to skip down to the green effect here, and it says produce units and upgrades to a value of 3. So that is your basic starting. You can do up to 3 production points of units and upgrades. But sometimes, like the Darkseid here, you have troops that give you bonuses to that action. So for example, if you look at the Darkseid here, you have some units that actually give you bonuses to that production action. The Planter here gives you +2, and then each of your breeders also give you +1. So if I have my Planter right here, I have a breeder right here, and a breeder right here, so I'm going to start with my 3 base, and then +2, which is 5, and then +1 and +1, which is 7. So now I'm going to have 7 production that I can use to build more troops or upgrade the troops that I already have out there. For example, my warriors here can be made into stingers for 1 each. So I'm definitely going to do that. Both of these guys are going to come out, and both of these stingers are going to be moving in here right like that. So I've used 2 of my production that way, and then I can use, let's see, I had 7, so I'm down to 5. I'm going to use 2 more to place these warriors out. Now normally you have to place your new units in a home zone or an adjacent area, but the Darkseid is a little bit different, and that's why I chose them to show off production, because they also have these egg sacs all over the place, and they can actually place units where they have those things. So I'm going to place 1 here, and then the egg sac comes away. And then the next one, let's go ahead and place him here. like so that he comes out of there and we have that egg sac there. So that is 2, 4, 5, 6. I have one more. Let's see here. Do I have another breeder? I do. I'm going to take a breeder and put them right here like that. And since I've used all of my production and or upgrade points, that would end my production for that turn of the phase. And then I would go back and I could also place 2 Oni during the green phase. So let me show you what that's all about. Now, Oni can only be placed in Tsukuyumi areas. So generally speaking, at the beginning of the game for sure, they would only be able to be placed on the moon and the 6 surrounding areas around the moon. So my card allows me to place 2 Oni. So I'm going to choose which ones I want to place out there. And so we're going to take these 2 guys here. And since that guy came in, we're going to place him there. And then we'll place one here as well because, well, you know, the only good bug is a dead bug. Now, in the red phase, more often than not, you're going to be able to have these areas where you can move. Now, the number that's in the little circle up there will tell you how many areas that they can move. This one specifically says 1, but there are some that says 2, which means that you can move all of your units 2 areas. This one, however, just says move each of your units up to 1 area. So, as we look back down here at the Boarlord situation, we're going to have this Warrior here use the tunnel, which only 1 person can use it per round, and he's going to move for free here, and then he's going to spend his action, his movement, to actually move over there. Because this was free, he can actually move an extra space. Then the Boar Maiden is going to come in here for her action, and then the Boar Guard here is going to use this tunnel and move in here for free, and then stay right there because he's going to try to conquest that, I would imagine. And then this guy's going to come in here for 1. These guys over here are going to come over like so. This guy will go back here, and the Boar Mother will come up here. The little squeaker, let's see, he'll stay there. And now that all the movement has occurred, we look at what else the red phase gives us the ability to do, and it says that we can execute up to 3 combat actions. So that's pretty cool. So now we can execute 3 combat actions, which means we're going to be taking our combat cards here and choosing which ones we want to do. Each player has a conquest card and an annihilation card. These are somewhat specific down here, but everybody has a basic conquest and annihilation card. And then you have other specific faction cards that are only yours, and they are unique to your faction that you can use. But generally speaking, you'll be using conquest and annihilation more often than not. If you choose Conquest, you're going to be attacking the area and not the troops that are in it. And this is where the Conquest value of the troops are important. So you have 2 Boarlord units, which have 15s up here in the corner, which is their Conquest value. Then you have 1 Oni, Eager Youth, which is a 20. So as long as the Boarlords have a conquest value of equal to or greater than 20, they will be able to perform a conquest in that area. We would give that conquest card to the person who is in last position because we're fighting the Oni. Normally, if we're fighting another player, we would actually give this card to that other player, and they would choose what happens or what the defending units do back to us. But since we're fighting the Oni, and we are actually in last place initiative, it would be given to the Darkseed player, and they would choose. So, we're going to go ahead and choose the counter-strike here. The defender's units cause damage, because what will happen here is he does 20 points of damage. And there are only 15 here and 10 here. So, what we will do here is we'll lose the Warrior because he takes out 10, and then there's 10 left, but there's only 15 here, So he actually isn't affected, or rather the Boar Maiden here isn't affected by the rest of that 10 damage, and they will be able to stay in the area. Now, since I have 2 more combat actions to take place, we're going to go ahead and perform a conquest here, and since there isn't anybody here, it just automatically happens because nobody is resisting us. So every zone that has nobody in it has a conquer value of 0, except for mountains, which I'm showing here, that have a 20 value for conquest, which means you would have to equal to or greater than 20 in order to conquer that region. And then finally, my last conquest will be over here, or my combat action will be over here to simply gain that area for free as well. And really, that's about the size of how this game plays, knowing how to move and when to conquer or annihilate or use one of your faction-specific combat cards to your most advantage is really the kind of where the crux of the game falls. These action cards really make it very simple for you to follow the course of a round, and that's one of the real elegant parts of the game, because really this game is just area control, battling, conquering, gaining points through accomplishing these missions and maybe your faction-specific goal and that type of stuff. But the elegance comes in where these action cards are, because everybody starts off doing pretty much the same thing and then kind of differentiates according to the strategy that you've chosen when you flip that card over and start going through the blue, green, and red phases. So that's a really cool thing about the game. Other things that I didn't really go over in detail are like using your faction-specific effects, but really it's just simple self-explanatory type stuff where you read what it says to do and then you do it. And most of them are not that difficult. For example, the comp group here don't even have a faction effect because they're powerful. Generally speaking, that's how you play the game. It's not difficult to play at all, but the depth comes in because of the asymmetry of the factions and how each of them play very differently from the others. The samurai are very heavy on affecting different things using their uplinks. The Darkseed are just trying to overwhelm you with sheer numbers. The Boarlords are kind of your tanks that all of them are pretty nasty guys, but they do have a few weaknesses and they're able to move a lot easier. The nomads use a lot of weaponry, and the robots are just massively cool and tough as well. So that's generally how you play the game. You're just supposed to score the most points, and whoever has the most points at the end of the last round is the winner. Now, as I said in the overview section of the video, this game becomes complex and a little difficult as you get into the asymmetry of the factions, because each faction plays completely differently than the others. And that's one of the real cool things about the game. And by the way, that's my first pro. I love the asymmetry of these factions. I don't think any one is more powerful than the other, with the exception of the robots. Still haven't really figured out the robots yet, the comp group 03 guys. They seem very, very, very powerful, but they do have a weakness, is that there's very few of them on the board. So if they're bunching up and staying together in that cluster that nobody can penetrate, they're not conquering a lot of places on the board. Whereas with the Darkseed, they have an enormous number in comparison of troops, and they can just spread out and conquer a bunch of different areas at the same time sometimes. So I don't think that any one faction is necessarily more powerful than the others, but they're completely different, and I love that. The second pro of the game is these action cards. First of all, I love the fact that you're drafting these. You start off with 6, and then you choose one and pass the others around. And then at the beginning of the second round, you take the cards that were passed from you, choose a card for that round, and then pass them again. I love card drafting. I think it's a great mechanism, and it provides you with strategic and tactical abilities. A third pro for the game is that I like that fourth in a three-player game, or that extra faction, if we want to put it that way, that everybody controls, because it provides different aspects of conflict in the game. You don't have to just necessarily worry about the direct conflict that you're having with your opponents. You're also going to have to worry about the Oni and the using them as another flank, so to speak. So if you can catch people on two flanks and really start hammering them, that's a really cool thing. But at the same time, you have to be careful with people doing that to you. So I really love the tension that is born from this idea of everybody's going to control this other faction that's on the board at different points throughout the course of the game. Just provides for a great tension in the game. Another pro for the game are these different missions that each faction brings to the table. Some of them are a little bit more easy to accomplish than others. As a matter of fact, if someone just gets lucky or places their home tile in just the right space, you can actually accomplish this one right off the bat by controlling one fertile ground, one mountain range, and one ocean floor. So that's, I mean, there's easy to that, but then it also goes all the way up to control 7 areas or conquer two Tsukuyumi areas, and those are pretty difficult as well. So I love these different missions and how the factions that you choose will change the different things that are in there. For example, maybe nobody's playing with the Cyber Samurai, so this one isn't even in the game. I like that. I think it's very cool. On top of that, the other faction-specific goals that you can try to accomplish give you a number of different things that you can choose to do, and it almost feels like a sandbox in that way, because you have so many different ways that you can kind of score points. Although it's not really a point salad, what you're doing is basically the same, but you have so many different avenues to go in. Now, my first con is going to be the components. Now, I say that in a very generalistic sense, but what I truly mean is the fact that these cardboard standees are in the thing, and the plastic on them is just too small and too tight. Every single one of my cardboard standees got ripped up or torn up as I was putting those plastic bases on them, and it really, really made it difficult for us. Myself and Mark Street were doing it at the same time, and oh man, it was so heart-wrenching to have to damage these different pieces of the game as you were putting it together so we could get it to the table. I can't really explain how it was, but it was just, oh, it made us feel so bad that we were literally damaging these things so that we could get it to the table. And I know some people have said, oh, who cares? The plastic's going to cover it up and everything. Yeah, I kind of get that, but I know it's there, and that's what really hurts. And some of the factions show the damage a little bit more than the others, so it's just one of the things that I really didn't like that much about it. Now, the other people that I've played with have said that they didn't really like the style of the tiles. They are double-sided, but they didn't like how bland it looked. But we have to remember the theme, and the backstory here is that we're dealing with scorched earth, basically, because the moon has collided into the earth, and of course we're post-apocalyptic at that point. So I'm not so much worried about that. The density of the tiles is good, and the same thing is true of the cardboard standees as well. So The main thing that I'm talking about with when I say it's a con for the components is the fact that these plastic bases should have been a little bit wider, maybe a little bit bigger, or the cardboard should have been a little bit thinner so that it didn't tear up the bottom of those cardboard standees as much. Another con of the game is that it probably plays too long for most people. It doesn't really bother me that much. I'm a fan of TI4, and I don't have a problem sitting down and playing a game for 4 or 5 hours. This one is probably around 3 hours at max if you play 5 rounds. But you can probably get a game in about 2 hours if you only played 4 or maybe 3 rounds. And that would be, I think, more palatable. But at its length, that's probably a con, that it plays a little bit longer than it really should. So the idea here is really that, you know, all in all, with everything being said, this is a very cool game, and I liked it a lot. I got introduced to it at Essen last year, and was able to play it no less than 4 times at Gen Con just a few weeks ago, and it was a great time. I loved playing the game, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm going to give Tsukuyumi Full Moon Down a full-on strong 8 out of 10, because it probably would be around an 8.5 or a 9 if the components, you know, those cardboard standees were a little bit more well thought out. But a strong 8 out of 10 because it is that cool of a game, and I love the different asymmetry that the factions represent. I love the artwork that's in the that are on the cards and on the standees, and I think a lot of great work went into that as well. So for all the things, 8 out of 10. I really do enjoy the game. I think it's great, and you guys should give it a try. Of course, if at all possible, try before you buy. But go ahead and get it checked out. 8 out of 10 from me. We'll see you guys and gals on the flip side.